Welcome to NRI Pulse, first of all.
Yes.
And my first question, obviously, is you're the youngest, the first African American, and the first female chairman of the Cobb County Board of Commissioners. So, what inspired you to run for office?
Well, initially, I can date having an interest in serving in leadership, even to childhood, and being involved, in grade school and even in college at Georgia Tech, that when I started working as an engineer for a company, I was still involved in the community and involved in different corporate initiatives, whether it be on women initiatives or and how to give back to the community. And so when I moved to the South Cobb area and just noticed some challenges, instinctively, I wanted to get involved and see how I could help to address those issues in my community. And 10 years of doing that, it resulted in me finally running for office. But at first, I just did everything from volunteer, sit in meetings, to I was invited to sit on boards and just kind of sat back. I was a secretary, and then just found my way just moving up and doing a little bit more strategic efforts to improve the area. It got to a point where I realized that the leadership had to change really for the trajectory of the area to change.
Right. So, did this come as a surprise to you that this shift, this political shift that we have seen in the state?
Yes.
Is this something you were expecting?
I've always felt, at least locally in Cobb, that the diversity of Cobb's people was not reflected in leadership, and that's not just pertaining to race. I mean, diversity of thought. That I tend to think that the thought leadership lags behind where the people are. And I knew things could change, but I didn't know the momentum of that shift until after the 2018 elections, when I saw how successful the statewide candidates were in Cobb County. Even though none of them were successful on the Democratic ticket, they were all successful in Cobb, meaning that if Cobb would have chosen the winner of that race, all of them would have won Cobb County. And that made me think that Cobb was a little bit further ahead than I thought. And, at that time in 2018, I had served on the board for about 6 years and just was contemplating what my next moves were. But that gave me a lot of assurance that Cobb could be ready to see some leadership change here.
So as, someone who obviously transcended race and gender, so what were the biggest challenges that you faced?
It's interesting you asked that. I've shared I was an engineer. I was a mechanical engineer. I worked in upstate New York. I went to Georgia Tech. There were so many instances where I was the only female or the only woman that perhaps I didn't consider these to be as nuanced as some people did with me serving in the role that I did. And I tend not to attribute some challenges due to that immediately, because if it's inherent, it's inherent. But perhaps there's just a little bit of more assurance I have of what role I have to play in that environment. But, I know that there certainly is something special about the change that has occurred to let people know that, yes, you can transcend those barriers of race and even of gender. I can say I used to live in East Cobb, and I live in South Cobb now, which is predominantly Black, more moderate income. And you can see disparities, not just in Cobb, probably nationally, of where there are more minorities, more people of low and moderate income, what the trajectory of that community may be. And I perceive that, because we're in Cobb, we should have transcended that Cobb should consider us as anyone else. And maybe that's the mindset that I take of any environment that I'm in. I don't make certain suppositions because of that. I presume that if there is a task to be completed, or if there is a goal, if there is a vision, that vision permeates all aspects of this, of who's in the room or that area that it's meant to touch. But I do know, having a female voice, I know, looking at myself moving from one position to another, and I look at some of my hang-ups, I do wonder, even though I may have a certain instinct or conviction, I wonder if some of my hangups are due to me always being the other, because you learn how to adjust yourself to be part of that room, to not sometimes to not stand out in that room. And sometimes I stand out as far as policy, but I wonder, as a woman, am I not used to asserting myself a certain way, or as a minority, are there certain things that I just won't say because I don't want to upset the apple cart? So I do feel like if there's any shifts, it allows us to have some conversations and allows me and maybe others to come to the table differently, than we would have in the past.
So now that you're here, Commissioner Cupid, so what are your priorities, the top 3, let's say, priorities for your first term?
People ask that, and I think that, only in an ideal space or on paper or theoretically do you have the blessing of choosing a top 3, because nobody would have said 12 months ago COVID would have been a top priority. And one thing I've learned serving in local government, yes, there's some things that you can be strategic about, but you never know what's going to be the issue of the day. And so when I came into this role, I had 2 primary goals. One was to address governance and to address equity. Governance matters because being in a part of the county that was so different than other parts of the county, I felt that a lot of it was attributed to how I was engaging in the board, and that there really was not a spirit of inclusion for what another voice of Cobb could look like, because our challenges just are not like other areas. But I felt that if you don't include your decision makers, especially in such a small body, you're leaving out their entire constituency. So I felt if I came on as a leader, I can help to ensure that every commissioner had a voice at the table, which gets to the issues of equity, because again, you do see that there are certain communities left behind or certain zip codes left behind. And I think it's important to have a voice to ensure that if we're here to serve all of Cobb County, then our services, again, they reach everyone here in Cobb, and they should reach them with a way that is fair or equitable in a sense. But I boil that down to 5 initiatives where I call being all in Cobb, and I have 5 in goals, IN. One is to be to have integrity in the decisions that we make, and that what we do is above board. But having integrity also means being honest of where we are as a county. 2 is that we make intelligent decisions, that we are looking not only at the short term, because we're fighting a lot of fires at the local government level because anything could come up, but we should be strategic in a sense. 3 is to be inclusive, that again, we're mindful of all of our stakeholders and all of our corners of the county. 4 is that we're innovative, and innovative as technology. We wouldn't be on Zoom, but being forced to be on Zoom. And being an engineer, I must say that I'm someone that has to be pushed sometimes to use technology. I like meeting people face to face, even for them to say, Lisa, take your calls by phone. It was foreign to me. And now, most of my meetings have been held online. But being innovative also comes to thought processes that we can't keep saying we've always done it that way and be comfortable with that. Because again, we find ourselves lagging our population's interest. And then lastly is for us to not be afraid to invest in Cobb. And, this is sometimes a difficult conversation when we've prided ourselves and had a lot of wins being a conservative county, that sometimes if we are not mindful of investing, that we can end up being inefficient with our resources because we're not maintaining capital. We're not supporting our people, which is our number one investment to keep our service levels up. So those are my baseline goals or strategic goals. But specifically, some things that I do see we need to focus on is transportation. We have a transit initiative in Cobb, COVID and response and recovery for businesses and human recovery. Also, housing is a big issue. And then policing and matters of social justice, I think, need to be on our radar. And finally, elections. Even though a lot of that's being captured at the state right now, there's still some things we can do here locally to address that.
Yeah, expanding transit services in Cobb, that was one of my questions. Can you elaborate a little more? What initiatives do you have in the pipeline?
Yes. So I don't know if you're aware of this regional transportation model through what's called the ATL that passed at the state through a House Bill 930. It gives local governments the option to have an increment of a penny or 0.1 of a penny to support transit initiatives. And so you have to go through this body to pull down any federal dollars to expand transit in your county. And so while we have this in play, there's opportunity for us to take advantage of that funding source. In Cobb County, we've had to really modify what transit means to us and what it can be for us, where, there's the MARTA Act that Cobb County had a chance to be a part of since back in the 70s that Cobb County never took advantage of for one reason or another. But now, Atlanta, we're talking, you're in Alpharetta, you stated, or Johns Creek. We're a regional, government, we're a regional place. And so we can't just talk about what we can do in Cobb, but looking at our interconnectedness. So some of that looks like expanding the reach, or not the reach, maybe the modality of MARTA, because MARTA is already in Cobb. They do travel from our art station to the Cumberland area here. They also go from a station called H.E. Holmes in Atlanta to the Six Flags area. But we have not connected to rail. Does that look like a possibility? Or does bus rapid transit look like a possibility? Also in 2011, we cut a lot of our local transit routes due to the economy, and we have not restored them. And so how does that impact people's ability to utilize transit? Where it was seen as maybe a mode of need at one point, but now it's a mode of opportunity. Like there's some businesses that don't want to go to places that don't have transit. And we consider ourselves an economic leader in Cobb. So we've got to look at what kind of transit options are we providing throughout the county. And also, as your population ages, there are people who simply want another source of transportation. So again, moving from just that thought of need, but what are the options that we're providing our citizens is important for us to consider. People are surprised, but about 80% of our residents in Cobb that use transit use it to get to work or to school. And so, that helps me to break down this myth of transit being associated with crime, which I think is a more of an archaic view that may have been here in Cobb. But it's still viewed, I think it's less viewed that way, but it's still viewed as that other tool that people use. But, I think we have opportunity to break down what transit means to all people here, that it can reduce congestion in other parts of the county. And again, looking at it from an economic development tool, there are jobs throughout the county where people may be able to get to or from if they had access to transit. So it's just learning how to speak transit in everyone's tongue, so to speak, so it's palatable.
Since we're obviously in the middle of a pandemic, so I have a few COVID questions.
Sure.
So we'll start with the one where, you accompanied Governor Kemp recently on a tour.
Yeah.
Where I believe the person, a resident, was actually vaccinated. And but Governor Kemp also mentioned that, while you're increasing the doses to about 154,000, per week, but still, you're way below the charts. And I think when you look at the whole United States, Georgia is like 47th or something when it comes to distribution. We're way below. So do you think by the end of the year, maybe all of the Cobb residents would possibly be vaccinated?
I have yet to project that far. And, even if I would have looked at the data we received a month or two ago, it was thought that we would have increased the number of vaccines that we get weekly at this point and then we were told, hey, you're going to have X amount every week. And due to the storm, we've had shipments not come. And so even just the base, the least amount that we thought we could depend on per week is being challenged. And so I just think none of us are in a position here at this level to make that type of projection. all we do is function with the information that's given to us, which is given to them and given to them. And we're told that, doses could increase by March, end of March, April timeframe. Time is certainly going to tell. Yeah.
So coming to the schools, in January, 3 teachers from Cobb County actually died of COVID. Yeah. So yeah, it's really sad. So is there some initiative being taken for the safety of the staff, teachers, and the students, obviously?
Thanks for asking. The reality is that for a lot of people, government is government, regardless if it's federal, state, local. But the reality is that there's so many distinct jurisdictions where the school board is a separate entity from Cobb County. And so there is some, any information I receive about how health matters pertaining to COVID are addressed in the schools have come out of almost the same information that the public had until recently. Today was my first board meeting as a board member of Cobb Douglas Public Health. And the superintendent of schools of Cobb Schools does serve on that board. We didn't address conditions going on in the school, but he did make a couple of comments, which I found were interesting to give a peek into concerns that the school has. It is certainly our hope that the school system is doing everything that they can to keep teachers safe. But if you listen to the news, you see, again, this is a national issue of the protection of teachers, the vulnerability of teachers, and this disproportionate expectation that schools be open, and which is one of the most public spaces of congregation in our society, where you have people coming together, which runs counter to what they tell you to do to keep the spread of COVID. But yet there is this expectation that's even being communicated from the president that every child should be in school 5 days a week. And yet we don't see vaccine being prioritized for that body. We don't see certain unique policies or practices being promulgated for that group in a way to give teachers and parents assurances. Unfortunately, I can't give you any more of a definitive answer than that. That it's my hope that they're doing more, but it's hard to say.
You mentioned, Superintendent, I think it's Chris Ragsdale, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Recently announced that, there's a possibility, especially for students returning in August of, 2021, that remote schooling could be like an option. So is that something you think is here to stay?
It's funny because I speak as a parent who homeschooled their child children for the past 3 or 4 years. And when I was running for chair, I was told, don't talk about that homeschool. Nobody will be able to relate to it. And then now everybody's a homeschool parent. It's funny, I think just in the, thinking of homeschool, it's something that I think has already been growing. And I think the more variability there is, or with what's going to happen with all of our schools, the more parents may turn to that as an option. And a lot of parents, are also turning to private school and some other school options as well. But I think until we get this pandemic underway, that, public schools are going to be losing that space as being that central focal point of education for young people, just because of fear. Yeah.
So a lot of the, Indian American, people are, especially in Cobb County, are small business owners.
Okay.
And, well, in general, so what kind of, incentives and, do you have for small business owners during, let's say in 2021?
Yeah, so we have had a number of incentives in place. The most recent incentive that we've put in place was in response to COVID, where the county received $132 million of CARES Act money in partnership with Select Cobb, which is affiliated with our chamber, we set aside $50 million to go to small businesses of 100 employees or less. And we were surprised to find that over 50% of the grant award went to minority-owned businesses. And I have to look at my numbers. I want to say maybe 26 or 27% went to women-owned businesses. And that's really remarkable considering Cobb and our general demographic that we have here. And I hope our small businesses take advantage of partnering with our chamber, and also in finding out how they can learn more about what goes on at the local government level, because, you know, if there was any impediment, we found it was through word of mouth. And so, you know, it's publications like these that help. We also, on our economic development page, and I could pull that up from here on my computer, I should have been doing that as I was speaking, we have had a number of incentives for small businesses. There are new business incentives if somebody wants to start a business, where they can get, I believe, up to a $10,000 grant. And it's interesting, we should have more people applying for those than we do. Then we also have grants available for persons in certain industries. We have grants available for businesses who are here that want to expand, because not all of our incentives are for new businesses. Some of them are for existing businesses. So I would encourage any small business owner to please go to our community development page. Our economic development is now housed within our community development department, and just search incentives and they'll find a list. But something else I also want to take advantage of, I want businesses to take advantage of, which are not traditional incentives, is that we have a business concierge service that a lot of times when you need different permits, or when you need to go through zoning or get other tasks done through the county, it's a big world of unknown. And so through community development and our business license office, we have a business concierge service where somebody can help someone from soup to nuts kind of navigate through that process. Trying to think of any other incentives that we do have. Those are some of them that we have a facade improvement program for certain areas of the county too, where a business can get a grant to improve the facade of their business as well. And again, all of that's on our community development page.
Like the building, the facade. What do you mean by facade?
The facade, the outside of a building. It's a building's exterior. So if it needs to be updated or improved, they can apply for a grant if they're in certain areas of the county for assistance. We have a development authority as well that provides some tax abatement or services. Or if somebody wants to redevelop as opposed to continuing to pay taxes on that, they can use that with that increment that they would have paid and invested back towards their business. So again, just can't stress enough just to check out our community development page.
So for the businesses that are going under loss during the pandemic, do you have any tax breaks and things like that?
I can't say tax breaks, but our community development office, I believe our tax assessor, they've waived fees. So, you know, as opposed to somebody having to pay late fees if they're having challenges, they can reach out to those organizations and get that waived.
Well, International Women's Day is coming up on March 8th. So
I'm writing that down.
Mm-hmm. So if you can give us a message, for the International Women's Day, so that would be nice.
I am a daughter of immigrants, and my family came here really by way of my grandmother, who came to this country and who worked very hard. She worked 2 full-time jobs, and she helped sponsor a lot of people to come to the U.S. And I look at the sacrifice that she's made, and now as she's aging, that that work ethic, that commitment to want to create a better life for your family can go such a long way. And as women, we are creators of life. And I think there's just a different level of conviction about how we change our families and our generation. our children and our children's children through our efforts. So I hope that, women from other countries that are here, and I can speak towards the U.S. I know it's the International Women's Day, but for any woman, that they should feel empowered, that they have this mojo, I think, that they bring to the table that nobody else has other than women, and that we give birth to life. And there is a connection that we have to humanity that drives us innately as women to be able to go out and go forth in a way that propels us, I think, unlike anybody else. And I'm not taking anything away from anyone else, but I know it to be true. I know, it's funny, when I had my first child and I would walk in the room, I felt like I deserved a standing ovation just for showing up, because of all that I had to do just to show up in the morning. And nobody knew that I worked a whole job just to get there and start my job. But we do that every day, again, because of that commitment that we have to family and wanting our children to succeed and other people's children to succeed and our children's children. And I think that's empowering to me. And if anything, I hope that we continue to propel ourselves and use that to help encourage other women to step up, to be confident in whatever they pursue, and to also feel like they can step up and lead in their own way as women.
Well,
I was just curious to know, do you have a role model? Did you grow up with a role model?
It's funny you say that. And I talk about my grandmother. I guess I felt like I always grew up around strong women. And I also grew up in Metro Detroit, where there are a lot of just people of color. But I remember just being amazed by women of color, and they were very strong. They were, I never felt any sense of inferiority from a lot of the women who I admired. Now, that's not to say that I didn't observe it, but I saw so many people breaking the mold that I think that's probably served as being a role model for me. My dad also, he was an engineer, a mechanical engineer, and prompted me to be a mechanical engineer. Where I grew up, my parents are from Guyana, South America. And there were not a lot of people from there. And my parents were very sheltering of us when we grew up. And so they were the only people around us that kind of helped shape our path. And so my mom didn't go to college, or she didn't go to college until I was in high school. But I remember our dad used to take us into his job. He worked at an automotive plant, and would walk around. And somehow I thought I could and that's the only thing I thought I could do, in fact. So for me to even vary from engineering was a big step for me to break out of my comfort zone, because I just didn't have a lot of examples for me, at least professionally, of other options.
I think you mentioned that you have to face your hangups even as commissioner of Cobb. I think you said that. I was wondering if this is something you've been able to overcome entirely.
I'm learning, I'm learning, sometimes I think because of the challenges I had as a commissioner from the area that I'm in, and not necessarily being included, you learn how to be effective in your space, but you certainly feel like there's a lid on how you participate. And so coming into leadership as chair, I've had to learn that, okay, you're the decision maker. You don't have to necessarily wait for permission to move the needle on something. But what does that look like when you're not used to exercising your voice that way, and other people aren't used to you exercising your voice that way, but they expect you to? And so there was a period of some awkwardness there, but I'm learning to still, I think there's a gift in humility. And I'm learning that I don't necessarily have to walk in the room demanding anything or commanding it, because inherent in the position is the ability to lead on matters. But I'm also learning for me to expect, though, that when I do speak or have an interest, I expect for certain people to respond as if I'm the leader. So, learning that I don't need to showcase that, but I need to learn how to be confident in that and to be firm in that. So I think that's getting better.
Are you the only minority woman on the board?
No. So this has been also the other big shift in Cobb is I was for the past 8 years, and now it's a majority minority commission now where there's 3 African-American women on a board of 5, 3 Democrats on a board of 5. And again, before I was I'm credited for being, I didn't know I was the youngest, but first female, first African-American, but I was the only Democrat. I was the only African-American for some time. And so it's nice to see that shift. There was one, our last Board of Commissioners meeting, I recognized her because I know she had challenges on the board. She served 1 term, and just from listening to her story, and she was my commissioner at the time, over the area where I was, I know she had more than her fair share of challenges. And so it's important to recognize that history.
All right.
Well,
thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you. You guys have a great rest of your week.
You too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.